one other quick question.
Sure.
Different subject.
Sure.
The other thing that I'm really interested about that is new to me, over the years I've gravitated, I guess, pretty strongly towards the libertarian side of things, but that really just stems from my hatred of politicians and how useless most of them seem to be, and generally just kind of wanting to live my life where the government doesn't bother me too much. So I had never really given too much thought to the idea of monarchy. It just seemed like, I mean, it's always presented as, this hellish,
Sure.
Dark Ages time.
Right.
So I was just curious in terms of monarchies and their association with the church, what happens if, I think people like to make the argument as far as like for democracies or republics or what have you, that if you wind up with bad politicians or a bad president or whatever it is, well, you can vote them out of there in 4 years or whatever it is. So, if you end up with a bad king,
well, I mean, that's what it's sold as, but in reality, democracies are oligarchies, and the oligarchs don't care about the people that the scoundrels that come and go, because that allows the people to think that they live in this democratic process when in fact they don't. It's run by an oligarchy.
Oh, well, I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah. So, but my question remains, and I'm sure I could just Google this, but are there examples in history of, what happens if you get a bad, murderous, crazy king? Are there kings and queens who have been excommunicated and the church is like, kind of blew it on that one?
Well, yeah, there have been tons of evil monarchs and emperors who've been excommunicated. But, look at the world today. Do we really have a better situation with democratic republics? Don't we have just as much of a series of scoundrels? So in other words, the form of government itself is not necessarily going to protect you from corruption. Any form of government is liable and susceptible to corruption, right? Aristotle talked about this. He said that you can talk about better and worse, but they're all potentially corruptible. In Aristotle's argument, monarchy was the best because he thought that, if you had a benevolent leader, that would be the best for the society, and by extension, if there's a continuance via a family, kind of gives the people something to rally around. And the difference there is that one basic point that monarchists make is that the monarch is basically there from birth to be a statesman, and so he has a kind of a lifelong duty to the country. But if you think about the purpose of a politician, the politician is in basically a captive to his benefactors, right? He's captive to those who have bought him off and own him. And ideally, the monarch is not that. He can't be bought off because he's a monarch, you see. So now, obviously, in the history of the world, it gets complex, and yes, monarchs are at times bought off. But the nature of the politician himself is such that he is a prostitute to actually be bought off by the highest bidders. So in other words, the politician, by the logic of being a politician, has no loyalty to the people. His only loyalty is to his base. That's it. And the people who fund him. And he knows that he's in and out in 4 years, maybe 8 years, right? So he has no basis to be loyal long term. The monarch, if he's not loyal long term, has the potentiality of being ousted, right? So you see the difference there, and losing his head, right? No politician, typically speaking, is going to lose his head. They're just whores to be bought off. So, yeah, I just think those are specious arguments that Democratic, Republican type people make, assuming that it's somehow inherently more virtuous system because it has these platitudes about the people and this kind of stuff. I don't actually think it's the case. And in fact, even some libertarians, like Hans Hermann Hoppe, argue that a monarchy is actually a more libertarian system.
Well, I think that it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways, because I was just thinking at a very simplistic level. I have a hard time imagining a monarchy that would be able to have grown such tentacles and be able to manipulate central banks to the point that you end up with the, military industrial complex is just one example that we have today.
Yeah, can I give you a book
recommendation?
Yeah. Can I give you a book recommendation on this? There's a good book called History of Central Banking by Goodson, and it kind of details this relationship between like democracies and banks and monarchies and banks. That's a good book. And then also Hoppe's books on, ironically, the funny part about it is that people have done studies where they compared like medieval French villages under monarchs and the laws and taxes that like the average French villager in the Middle Ages paid, and like how much time off he got versus the way we live today. And we think we're free, but like we work like 5 times more for like 5 times less than what medieval villagers like. So again, I mean, people don't know that kind of stuff. That puts things into perspective, and that is kind of the line of argumentation that Hoppe makes for monarchy actually being more libertarian than democracies. Democracies just really democracies. They really just kind of end up being these. I think a republic is better than a democracy straight up. I mean, that's the worst, because that's just really oligarchy. And the oligarchy and the politicians, in order to, quote, run a democracy, the logic of that system dictates that they basically just appeal to the lowest common denominator, and thus to have the biggest numbers, and thus to the basest desires to control the greatest number of people. So the logic of that system is, and that's why even Plato, right, who was, the great proponent of a republic. I mean, Plato says that democracy is just the worst form of government because it immediately leads to a tyranny on the basis of an oligarch or oligarchy, because they have debased the people to be controlled by their passions. And I think Plato's totally right about that. But that doesn't mean I accept Plato's ideal republic, because Plato's ideal republic is actually the basis for all the communist dictatorships. All communist dictatorships and Soviet republics, communist republics, where do you think that comes from? Who wrote the Republic? Plato.
Yep.
Anyway.
Well, it's good stuff, man, and thank you for the help with the Quine-Hume thing. I'll have to just keep, digging into really get it.
Let me. There's a really good lecture that a professor did. Let me post that lecture. I don't remember this guy's name, but you'll have to watch the whole lecture to really get the point, and you'll see that I borrowed some of my analogies from him. I think he's just some professor from Austin. So I will share that in the chat. If you want to look it up on YouTube, it's called Quine on Analyticity and Other Dogmas by Professor Daniel Bonavac. I'll put it in the chat. His 1-hour lecture is a really good overview of the 2 dogmas, and he explains it really well. He gives a lot of good analogies. So again, it's the channel is it's Daniel Bonavac, who's a professor in Austin, and it's called Quine on Analyticity and Other Dogmas. So if you really want to get a more in-depth analysis of the 2 dogmas, I would recommend his lecture. I reread Quine's 2 dogmas, right? Because I hadn't looked at this since like 2006 in undergrad. So last week I reread the whole thing. I went and I reread Father Deacon's paper on it. And I watched 2 lectures from 2 different professors on it. So I'm pretty sure I'm correct in the way that I'm understanding Quine's 2 dogmas. So go watch Professor Bonavac's lecture and tell me if I'm getting it right. See what you think.